do the standard mic check. Can you guys hear me at the back? Yes, no? Okay, good. All right, so this talk is based on the premise that all of you are UI developers. Anyone who is not a UI developer? Okay, only one. Okay, all the right hands are raising now. Oh my God. Okay. So I'm assuming that you all become UI developers by the end of this talk at least, or at least gain enough of an insight to become one, right? So how many of you have been doing UI development for, let's say, 4 to 5 years? Okay, good. More than 5 years? More than 10 years? Wow, we have more than 10 years. Awesome. So probably I'm in that club maybe. All right. Any mobile developers here? Like who purely do mobile development? Okay. That's like 1/10 of the room over here. Awesome. All right. So this talk is actually based on the premise that as you move between different frameworks, technologies, platforms, there are certain things which you'll see are very similar as you do between various places. And the techniques that you apply from one platform are equally applicable to other platforms as well. So this is my own experience across 18 years of UI development, all the way from assembly language to present day web, mobile, etc. And I've collected all these insights to kind of package them into a set of 3 fundamental areas, which are data, UI, and the mental model. Right? So my talk is going to be divided into 3 basic segments. And I'm going to talk about how each of these segments helps in building UIs across different platforms. So let's start with a very basic notion, which is this. Ultimately, in a UI development, it is not the UI that's actually more important, it's the data. Because data is the beating heart of your UI, and without data there can't be any UI, right? And UI is just a representation, a pixel representation of your data. So if you focus more on the data and build it structures, data structures and algorithms around data itself, the UI becomes a natural fallout, and it becomes easier to actually model the UI as well because your data has been structured nicely. So when you start building a UI project, focus first on the data and don't be carried away by the fancy designs that you get. It's very easy to kind of start coding a HTML interface or a mobile interface, but I think your focus should be less on the UI itself, but more on the data that needs to be spread across the entire user interface. So data is a beating heart and just the real power behind any user interface. So if your data is good, your UI naturally becomes good. So focus more on the data first. And if you have done any web development, you must have seen this equation at least a couple of times on the internet, right? Anyone who has not seen the equation? All are shy enough not to raise their hands. All right. So this equation is actually very fundamentally important because what it's trying to tell you over here is that the state or the data of your application is what's at the core of your entire application. And the UI is just a function, a transformation that happens from the data which becomes eventually the pixels on the screen, right? So this is the fundamental equation over here. And the transformation is required because ultimately your data that is shown on the screen may not always be in the same format. Even though you have JSON coming in from the server, you're actually not showing JSON on the screen, right? You're showing in a different way, maybe tables, charts, interfaces of different kinds and so on. So this transformation that happens is what you guys do as UI developers. You are spending most of your time on that FN over there, doing this transformation from data onto the UI. But the state that you see on the screen actually gets divided into 2 primary areas. The most important is what's visible on the screen, which is the component state. And at any point in time, the UI is only showing you a part of the entire state. Right? What lies underneath, submerged, is the application state. It's almost the iceberg application. Any UI looks like this. What you see on the screen or the screen full at a time is only part of the entire picture, right? The big picture is actually lying underneath. So what you're doing is spending time more on the component state and then absorbing things from the application state and surfacing it to the component state. As you move between different parts of your UI, you're essentially just taking different parts of the application state and surfacing it up. Now the data actually comes from the server most of the time, right? That is not actually residing on the client itself, unless you're building an application where the data is already on the client. And the most classic application could be like the kiosk, right? Most of the data is mostly on the kiosk, except for your account information or something of that sort, which has to come from the cloud. So most of the time you're dealing with data which is not on the client side already. So there has to be some kind of a network connection being made to actually fetch this data onto the client. And that gets given to the root of your application, which could be a window or it could be a collection of windows. And that root eventually contains a giant tree of components across which you're going to spread your entire data. So each of these different pieces inside your UI comes to life because you're actually giving it data, right? And most of the time the data comes from the top and then trickles down into different parts of the tree. And trees is a very common data structure in any user interface. In fact, almost all of the time you're dealing with trees, right? And data comes from the top, and the natural gravitational force is pushing the data across different parts of your tree. Now, the data actually, is given although to different parts of the UI, but normally we have used some terminology to capture this in a collective form called the store. And I think most of you have done React or Flutter or any kind of UI development has encountered this term already, right? You have created stores for yourself. How many of you are Redux developers here? I would imagine 99% of the room, right? So Redux has this notion of a store, right? A single source of truth, which is where it contains the entire source of your application. So the store is where you store this information, and then use that to spread it across different parts of the UI. And you use a connect function to make the connection between the store and the component itself, right? That's what you guys would do in Redux. Now this store itself could be of different kinds, right? You can actually have a store which is just one single store which contains the data for your entire application. It could be multiple stores. If it's a very complex application where you have independent islands of functionality, your store could actually be spread across multiple stores. I mean, your data could be spread across multiple stores. Or you could also have a single store with a more complex hierarchical structure. And this happens, when in large scale applications where, you are bringing in data dynamically, right? Most of the time, the entire application is not already on the client. And as and when you navigate to different parts of the application, you would automatically, fetch the code for it and render that piece of the UI for you. So in that case, you can have a hierarchy of stores and, spread the data and organize things differently. But no matter what be the case, ultimately, this is what happens. Your data is the beating heart, and that is what drives the entire UI. And at any point in time, you are only giving a pixel representation to the data, right? So remember this part. So don't be carried away by the fanciness of the design, but focus more on the data. And this is a fundamental mistake I made in my own career, where I would see some really awesome looking design, and I would spend all my time really understanding like how can I draw pixels like this without actually taking care of the data that needs to drive that UI. And if you don't do that, you end up creating really good looking UI, but in a very bad data structures to drive it. And your complexity will eventually become more focused on the state management. When data needs to be spread across multiple parts of the application, you realize that there is something wrong here, and you're just dealing with like a multi-headed hydra or something of that sort, where it becomes monstrous to deal with. So focus on data, don't be carried away by the UI. Although UI is what ultimately the consumer sees, but eventually, but as a developer, you should focus more on the data. So that's more on the data itself, but let's focus a little bit on the UI side of things now. Now, at the heart of any UI application and the tree of components that you see is the notion of a component. Now, what exactly is a component? Well, a component actually is an interface. It is the building block of the giant interface that you see in front of you. Now, within a component, you can have the state. So, a component did not get its data from the outside. It can also have states of its own. So, state of its own, any component that you normally see on the UI, this could be examples like a button, a simple button, right? The humble button. Now, when you move your mouse on a button, the button needs to be highlighted. Very simple application, right? When you click the button, obviously there has to be a different visual state for the button. Now, that is state which is inherent to the component itself. The fact that a button is highlighted or depressed is not coming from the application, right? It is not the application state that is rendering on the button. It's the button state itself. So this is an example where the state of the UI is in the button itself or in the component itself. So components can have their own state, right? But at the same time, they can also receive inputs from the outside. And this could be the case where you're showing a tree of a tree widget, for example, right? In a tree, the data for the tree is not within the tree itself. It's some JSON structure being transformed to look like a tree, so you can expand, collapse, and navigate to different parts and so on and so forth. So in this case, the inputs are coming from the outside. But this is what I'm talking about is in terms of the interface of a single component. You also have outputs, right? A component needs to have output. And what is one common output you will see from any component? HTML is one, right? The DOM, or it could be the UI of the component itself. Now, the component can be actually be part of a large tree, or you can have an application which is just one component itself. But no matter be the case, the component ultimately is showing something on the screen. It is creating a pixel representation of the inputs and its own state and ending up on the tree somewhere, right? On the UI somewhere. So the output, one of the primary outputs of any component would be some fragment of the entire application. Now there is actually one more output or set of outputs that can come from a component. Can you guys guess what it could be? So you receive data as input, UI comes out as output, What else could be an output from a single component? Any idea? I heard it already. Events and callbacks. Exactly. So this is also a way for a component to talk back, right? Most of the time the component is actually getting information, like someone is like strangling the head and saying, you know what, this is the data you need to show. But how does a component actually talk back to the rest of the world? Well, events and callbacks. It's the only way you can communicate data back to the world. You receive data, but you never actually give back data. But this is a way to do it. So you don't actually talk back in the form of data directly. You talk back in the form of events and callbacks. And this is the interface of a single component that sits inside a giant tree. Now, if you imagine constructing the entire tree out of such individual components, you can actually create trees of any complexity, right? You can, because you're ultimately just connecting pieces together like Lego blocks. The interface is common, and data from one component could be the input to somebody else, right? The output of one component could be the input to somebody else. And the events and callbacks that have been surfaced from any bottommost component can also be surfaced back to the top. But there are other mechanisms to do that. I mean, you don't always create a thread of data and callbacks from the bottommost to the topmost. There are several mechanisms to actually do this. And one common way is the store, where every component over here talks to the store. The store again talks to the root of your application, and the whole application re-renders itself. And this notion of a unidirectional data flow has been made popular with React. And almost all other UI platforms that are out there are actually using this particular feature of unidirectional data flows. Because again, data is the most important thing, and UI just happens to be a representation of this data at any point in time. But the notion of a component and the fact that you can break down a complex looking component into smaller fragments is at the crux of UI development. As an example, if you look at this complex clock or a watch face, right? This is an Apple Watch face. And if you look at it, there is a lot of complexity going on over here. It has the strap, the shell, it has the buttons on the side, you have the dials, you have the numbers also radially spread out, and then you have the hour hand, the minute hand, and there is some other animations and stuff going on inside. So there's a lot of enough detail on this watch face which have been flattened out. But if you explode this, there's a lot of additional detail over here, right? You have a lot of things being combined together. And when you flatten out this interface, it becomes a watch. So as a UI developer, and as a when you start out building this particular watch face, the designer would give you something like this, a single image, right? And it looks really fancy because wow, this is a beautiful looking watch face. But as a developer, you have to spend your time in breaking it down. Decomposing this complex interface into a tree of components is your primary job. And many times the boundaries that you create for these components makes or breaks your entire application. If you draw the lines at the wrong places, I can imagine complexity getting created. If you combine the dials and the hour hand into a single component, obviously that doesn't go well, right? They are not really related. So how do you create boundaries inside a component tree, and how do you create components so that there is a natural flow of data from input all the way to the output? So that becomes a challenge. And so many times, in fact most of the time as a UI developer, you will spend time in doing this kind of a structuring, and decomposing a complex looking piece of interface into its own component trees. But to think of this, you can assign some responsibilities to your entire application. So the common responsibilities are these. When you start your UI development, you should start from the notion that ultimately you are creating rectangles on the screen. You have a giant rectangle, but you are painting much smaller rectangles on the screen, right? So layout becomes a fundamental idea of spreading the pixels across the entire screen real estate. So you'll start with a layout, and this layout could be flex based or a grid layout or other forms of layout, constraint based layouts, and so on and so forth, right? So but the layout is how you divide your giant screen real estate into smaller fragments, and then within those layouts you place controls and components, right? So a wireframe is what you naturally have to deal with. The skeleton of your application is what you have to come up with first, and then you start filling it with additional data. Now within those little rectangles, you will start creating more meaningful content and apply styles, and then of course events to kind of surface information back from that, and then also behaviors. Now behaviors are reusable interactions that you can actually apply to any of these rectangles. So a button has a reusable behavior of firing a callback, highlighting and getting depressed, and you can also have other components which are doing micro interactions. A common micro interaction could be when you click the favorite button in Twitter, it plays a nice animation, right? It plays a particle engine animation where you have some things going on and fluttering out. So those are all things which are embedded as behaviors, and you can apply that behavior to anything on your screen. So this is how you divide the responsibilities in your real estate, in a screen real estate, by starting with the rectangle that needs to be drawn on the screen and then filling that rectangle with more complex styles and behaviors. Now this is one part of the whole equation. The other side of things is the state analysis. Now this is where, as a component developer, you have to understand that your component lives through several states during the lifetime of the application. You could start with a inbox-like component which has no emails to start with. And then as you start getting more emails, you'll start filling in the list view with more list items. And some of these list items could have more state built into it, as in whether you have a read email or an unread email, and whether you have selected the email or not, whether you have swiped and done a gesture on the email or not, and so on and so forth. So if you're given a user interface by your designer, you have to spend time in, first of all, decomposing it, just like the clock example, the watch face example, where you have to break it down into a tree of components. At the same time, you also have to do the state analysis to make sure that your UI can live through all the possible visual states of the data. Because ultimately, data is what drives the UI, right? So data can be empty, could be having some values, and then within the data, you can have more values, in terms of how you represent the read and unread state of an email, whether you have selected something or not, whether you are swiped on the email or not, and so on. So every single piece of data and information that is captured on the store or on the data has to be represented on the UI. The UI doesn't have the intelligence to do this. The intelligence has to come from the data, right? But you have to give a visual state to that data, and this is how you do it, by applying a state analysis and exploring the interface well enough to understand that it is to go through all of the different states. With me so far? Yes. Am I going too fast? Good? Okay, good. So let's apply some of these ideas to 3 different frameworks. And I'm not going to go into details of individual frameworks and don't even expect you to know the code and everything. But just to kind of give you an example of how data and components manifest in all of these different frameworks. So how many of you are familiar with each one of them? At least heard of them, right? I expect all of you to raise your hands at this point, right? So this is all the classic frameworks and techniques and technologies that we're using as of today, and I'm sure more will come in the future. Obviously, you don't see jQuery, Backbone, Knockout. What else is there? Any other ancient technology that we are still using here? COBOL maybe, I don't know. So you don't see that over here, right? If I give the same talk in 5 years, I'm sure this slide will change, because UI is progressing at a very fast pace. So if you look at these 3 frameworks and you just kind of do a very high level comparison, this is what it looks like. They have different programming languages to program the user interface itself. Flutter uses Dart. In React, it is JavaScript, but JavaScript as a language is not good enough to describe UIs, because a UI is a tree of components, right? And JavaScript as a language is not good to represent a tree of components. You can use arrays and objects, but still it doesn't look great. And React being closer to HTML, because it was first originated on the web side of things and then moved into React Native, the web is primarily built out of XML, which is HTML, right? So what they did was they created a dialect of JavaScript called JSX to introduce this XML notion into JavaScript as a language, so that when you describe your UI in text, it looks readable. And that's the fundamental thing about user interfaces. Most of the time, you are dealing with an interface which is looking in text in the form of a tree, right? JSX is ultimately tree represented in the form of text, and so on and so forth for languages like Dart and Swift. They also have adopted dialects and DSLs, or domain specific languages, which makes it easy to represent UI in text. As a developer, you spend a lot of time in text, right? Eventually, if you have hot reload and stuff, obviously you'll see the screen changing as you change the text, but you spend a lot of time in text, and that's what the tools use to even render UIs. So this is the fundamental difference, and you can see that it's the same kind of notion everywhere. A component becomes a widget, a component becomes a view, right? So it's all the same language. There might be terminology differences, programming language differences, API differences, but at the end of it, all these frameworks are behaving in very similar ways, and that's the whole point of this talk as well. So let's just look a little deeper into Flutter. I don't expect you to read this code, especially at the back, but just to kind of give you a high level overview, you can see that there is some kind of a tree structure in your code over here, right? Don't worry about the exact details, but you can see that you are representing the widget tree in some tree structure, right? The Dart as a language has built-in DSL or built-in syntax to create a tree for you. Now, as Flutter as a framework, gives you stateless widget and stateful widget. But remember the component state. There are components which are purely rendering pixels, and there are components that can have their own state, like a button, right? So a Flutter also has this notion of a stateless widget and a stateful widget. It has a giant library of widgets which you can use to kind of create your interfaces very quickly, and then it has this notion of notifying changes happening on the data side of things. So as data changes, the UI needs to be notified that something is changing and re-render itself, right? So it has these notions built in, and there is a state management frameworks like Redux, MobX, Block, etc., which kind of makes it easy to manage the more complex state management aspects of your application and surface it to the UI. So that's Flutter for you. Let's look at other frameworks like React, and I'm sure most of you now will smile because this is something which is more familiar to you probably, right? In React, what do you have? Well, you have components, you have portals. How many of you know what portals are? Have you guys used portals, by the way? Portals is like the science fiction concept in React, right? It allows you to go from one web page to another web page. Teleportation? No? Okay. That's not it, by the way. Portals is something else in React, right? Portals is a way of creating multiple islands of React trees and having a common context to bind them all. So context is something else, which I'll get to in a little later. But you have other things like hooks, which is just a different way of creating components. Rather than using classes, you use functions to compose widgets. And then of course you have Redux and MobX as well. But here again, you can see that in the code, there is a definite syntax to describe UIs in the form of a tree structure. Swift UI, how many of you use Swift UI, by the way? None? Have you guys heard of it? Okay, but haven't used it yet. Okay. So Swift UI has again very similar concepts. Since you haven't used it before, these are the abstractions available in Swift UI. You have the view, which is just like a widget or a component, but then you have more additional abstractions like a view modifier or a view builder, which allows you to create a DSL syntax which composes the UI completely for you. So here again you can see that there is a tree structure forming. You have at the top level a V stack, then you have a H stack, and then some other components inside it, and so on and so forth. And it also has this notion of state, which is the state inherent to the component, and then the environment object, which is an annotation which allows you to pull in data from the environment. Now, do you guys understand what is an environment for any UI? What kind of environmental data can a UI use? Any examples you guys can give me? Yeah, I've done it already in the past. It's just the terminology probably might be different. What is the environmental data that any UI uses? That is not on the UI itself? Screen resolution? Absolutely. For responsive UIs, you do have to know the screen resolution and the width and height, right? That's environment to the UI. The environment is the overall context in which a UI is running, right? This could be your screen, it could be the themes, preferences, translation dictionaries. All of these are environmental information which are used to drive the UI, right? So in Swift UI, you have this notion nicely captured in the form of environments. In case of React, what do you use for environments? Somebody said it already. Context. The React context is the way of exchanging or transferring information across the entire tree, right? So how do you set up your theme providers? You create a provider and somewhere you have a consumer, right? So this is how you would actually spread information from the root all the way towards your React tree. So anyway, all of these similarities is what I'm trying to focus on right now. That anywhere as you go between platform to platform or frameworks to frameworks, you will see that there is a lot of similarity over here. So when you start off your UI development, you spend a lot of time in the declarative representation of your UI, right? You use various languages to do this, and ultimately you are constructing a tree of components. And each of these different frameworks gives you different languages and techniques to do it. But these frameworks don't actually paint directly to the screen. There is an additional step in between, and that's called the intermediate representation. And each of these frameworks has their own way of intermediately representing that particular model of your declarative representation. So in case of React, you have virtual DOM. In case of Flutter, you have render objects. And in case of Swift UI, you have core animation layers or NS views or UI views. And these are the intermediate representations which are used to optimize things, to do caching, and increase the effective usage of your core native objects. And ultimately, these objects are then rendered onto the screen, onto different platforms, right? So eventually you will see a mobile screen lighting up or a desktop screen lighting up, or it could even be the watch face. So if you look at Swift UI, you can write your code in a single language, and then the intermediate representation allows you to target the same UI onto all the way from watchOS to tvOS, right? That's just an example in Swift. And the same goes for React as well. Although in React, this is my own personal opinion, they promised us that you can write your code once and run it everywhere. I haven't seen it happen yet. If you write your code in React for web and try to run the same thing on React Native, well, tell me what happens. It doesn't run, by the way. Yeah, that's a blooper right there. So although some frameworks promise to do it, it's not that straightforward. And Flutter is probably the only framework I've seen so far which is kind of getting this promised land and making it actually happen. And you can see the code running on the web, on desktop, and also on mobile frameworks, on mobile technologies like iOS and Android. It seems to almost have the same code base, and there is some differences between different platforms which you have to hide in the form of some layer in between, but most of the code base is actually getting shared. So I'm hoping Flutter can actually eliminate all the differences between platforms and give you one single way of writing code. So far we have seen the data side of things and we have seen the component side of things. So let's just switch tracks a little bit and move on to the mental model of UI development. So when you are building UIs, what is the frame in which you should operate? The most important one is this. What you have as a UI developer is the notion of the play with a UI tree, right? You are crafting the UI tree in code, creating declarative representations, but what you're ultimately doing is sending data down and then bubbling events up. So data down, event up is the only way in which data should flow inside your UI tree. And this is a mantra you should apply everywhere. If you see that these directions are getting reversed for some reason, then you have a problem naturally sitting in your hands. There's a problem in your design, problem in your implementation as well. Make sure data always flows down and never in the opposite direction. The only way in which a data can flow in the opposite direction is through events. So data down, event up. Just remember that mantra and you should be fine. There's also one additional wrinkle in this particular tree. How do you deal with data that is environmental, right? We talked about environments earlier, where you have data that is actually applicable across the entire tree. And it is not something you can pass like a threaded way of passing inputs across the entire tree. And that is where context comes in. And each of the frameworks have their own way of capturing context, which allows you to pass data which is sitting at the environmental level and making it accessible to any part of the application. So React does it through React context, Swift does it through environment objects, and Flutter also does it through providers. So this is the context which will be there as sitting as data and applying to all of the different components across your tree. Let's take one other notion which is part of the mental model, which is state. Now this actually is a very, very important aspect of rendering state on the UI. State is always read synchronously but rendered asynchronously. Do you guys follow what that means? Can any of you be brave enough to kind of tell me what that actually means? What do you mean by state being read synchronously and rendered asynchronously? Let's take React as an example. When you write your JSX code and you're inside your render method, the data that you're reading inside over there is always synchronous. The point in time in runtime, at runtime, when React is trying to render your component, when it executes the render method, it expects all the data that the component needs is already available in the render through props, or state, right? So data is always read synchronously. It is not waiting for data to be available inside the render method. The render should always have the data ready. So the data or state is always read synchronously. But after you do your job of constructing the virtual DOM for that particular React component, React takes the responsibility of rendering that component whenever it seems it is ready. Whenever it thinks it is ready to render the entire tree. So the rendering of that particular component happens asynchronously, which is why when you do something like a set state in React, you also get a callback to tell you when the state actually has been set, right? So set state has this notion of callbacks built in, and it happens because the rendering happens asynchronously. So state is always read synchronously but rendered asynchronously, and this is the notion with which every single UI platform or a framework operates. Nobody can violate this rule. Because if you violate this rule, you are doomed. You cannot render UI on the screen anymore. This is like an axiom that you simply cannot beat against. You have to follow the standard rules. But this is a very important rule that every framework tries to do. But state in itself, right? How do you change the state? You can obviously go and mutate the properties directly. How do you change state? Well, people have introduced the notion of actions. So why do we need an action, right? Why can't we just go in and change something person.name equal to a new name? Why can't we just do that? Well, the reason why we have actions is to capture the fact that there is an operation which is changing the state. And by giving names to those operations, you are elevating that particular piece of code to have a semantic meaning. Right? Otherwise, I could just simply write code where a equal to b, a.c equal to c, or whatever it may be the case, right? And that kind of code looks gibberish. It is useless. It is not maintainable. And as developers working on a larger team, seeing such code and writing such code is just disastrous. So by elevating those little pieces of code into actions, you are giving it meaning that, okay, there's an operation that is happening which is resulting in a change in state, right? So if I want to change the name of the person, I'll probably have an action called change name. And that is more meaningful as well. And as for maintenance and making sure your team can be having a sane mind throughout the development, you can give names to those actions. But just having actions to mutate state is not enough, right? You also need observers. And these are the people, are the set of entities which are listening to the changes in state. In Redux, what do? You write the connect method, right? That is how you're connecting the observer or the component to the state or the store of your application. So you do need observers. And these two things actually complete the equation. Observers can also fire side effects. And side effect model, this is what I'm talking about right now, is the fundamental way in which you should think about UI. So you have the core state, which is reactive. There are actions being fired to change the state. There are observers listening to the change in state and then obviously performing side effects. Now, one of the most glorified side effect of everything that you see on the application is what? What is the most glorified side effect in an application? You won't believe what I'm going to say now. The most glorified side effect is actually rendering the UI. The state of your application, the actions that mutate the state is all on the data side of things. The UI is just a side effect of having changes in data. There is an observer sitting somewhere, which is the framework, React or Flutter or Swift UI. These guys are tapping into the state and providing you a render surface on which you see the end UI or the pixels being drawn. So pixels on the screen is just a side effect of a change in state. It is not a special activity that you have to do. Your job is to design the state, which is the data of your application, and make it reactive so that it fires notifications whenever there is a change. And then someone who is going to listen to this will take the responsibility of translating that through that FN, the transformative function, and create a UI for you and draw pixels on the screen. And those pixels are just a side effect of having a change in state. But of course, these side effects can also fire more actions, right? So the button on the screen, which when you click on it, it fires a network action. That's an action being fired from a button. So the side effects, which is the UI, is also firing actions. And herein you can see the loop. The loop is always going in one direction. Actions change state, observers listen to change in state, render the UI, and UI can also fire more actions. And that completes the entire loop of your side effects. So always think of your UI in these terms. What are actions being fired? What is the reactive state of my application? And what side effects am I producing? And side effects need not be just UI, by the way. Side effects could be things like a network call. It could be your animations running on the screen. These are all things happening because something happened on the data side, and you're just giving a visual representation to it. Now, the state itself, of course, renders in different ways in different frameworks. In case of Redux, you will see Redux and MobX as being the classic ones. Although my personal preference is MobX, and you guys heard it before, right? Why? Also, in case of Flutter, you have the similar kind of things with provider, Redux, MobX, block. These are all different ways in which you render and capture the state of your application. Whereas in case of Swift UI, you have this notion of an observable object captured by @state and @environment object. So the same data gets rendered or captured differently in different frameworks. And as you move between different frameworks, and I'm sure during the lifetime doing a career inside when you're doing UI development, you will be dealing with multiple frameworks and platforms. But understanding that data is what drives the UI, and data gets represented in different ways in different platforms, you will be able to map between different platforms and frameworks much more easily. Now let me come to the side of things which probably is not very intuitive when you're doing UI development. And unfortunately, our schools, universities don't teach this. And we have to learn the hard way of doing it. How many of you have heard this? Wow. That makes me happy actually, to see so many hands go up. What is this, by the way? What is solid? Set of principles. Why do we need principles? It's a waste of time, right? I mean, someone had so much time, they just said, let's make principles. No, there is a reason why you need this. This is how you think about software engineering. UI happens to be just one way of engineering software, but they're all based on the same set of principles. It doesn't matter whether you're doing front end, back end, middle tier, full stack, half stack, middle stack, doesn't matter. It's all about principles. The same principles get applied across the board, no matter what you do when you're writing code. So what is solid? Let's take a quick quiz over here, and let's see if we can actually run down the entire list. S for? Everyone gets that right, I don't know why. It's single responsibility. Single responsibility is a Unix philosophy, right? Do one thing and one thing well. What about O? Open close principle. This is a classic interview question. Right? You ask this question, you can spend the entire hour on it, explaining what is open closed. They can give you the definition very easily. Okay, open for extension, close for modification. You tell them, give me an example. I don't know. So giving an example, this is hard. So open close principle is about creating maintainable software. When you want to add new functionality, you don't go and modify the code that you already wrote. You're going to just create a pluggable piece of functionality which you can just attach as a hook, or through a callback, through some kind of an interface, or whatever it may be. But don't modify the code that you already wrote, because the code that you already wrote has already been tested. If you're going to inject more code into it, you have to retest the whole thing again. And anytime you want to retest code that you have written, obviously adds more surface area, it creates complexities and combinatoric explosion of various use cases and edge cases. Right? The reason why open close principle is important is because you don't want to touch the code you already wrote. You want to keep adding more code rather than modifying existing code. And that way, if you want to remove code and remove functionality, it's just a matter of removing it. Right? So open close is a quick way and a nice way to kind of make it maintainable over time. I'll give it away, Liskov substitution. This actually has no meaning whatsoever. Liskov substitution, what the hell is that? So Liskov substitution is about creating components which can be replaced by other components that have the same interface. Right? So let's take an example. In a React tree, if I'm using a regular button, like I open tag, put button over there, put an action, and so on and so forth. Now tomorrow if somebody comes in and creates a new fancy button, let's call it fancy button, I should just be able to change the button to a fancy button and things should still work. Right? And the reason why it works is because interface. It follows the same interface, the same contract. And because it follows the same contract, it can be substituted. A button can be substituted by any other form of button which has the same contract and interface. Right? And that's what this principle is all about. It's about creating replacements for existing pieces of code. Interface segregation, inversion of control. But the reason why it exists is because if you have a monolithic structure, it's too hard to maintain and manage. It's much better to have smaller pieces of functionality, and you only create interfaces for those smaller pieces as and when you need it, rather than trying to adhere to a much larger interface. Right? So this makes it easy to actually segregate a larger interface into smaller pieces, so you deal with a smaller piece. If I give you a thali of food, do you just take the whole thali and put it in your mouth? If you do that, then please meet me separately. But what do you do mostly, right? You take bit by bit and then put it in your mouth, piece of code at a time. That's what interface segregation is all about. You segregate a larger interface into smaller pieces and then just work with the ones which you need. And finally, dependency inversion. Rather than depending on the implementation, you depend on the interface, because when the implementation changes, you don't have to worry about it because you're only depending on the interface. Right? And that's why you can replace a button with a fancy button using your Liskov substitution. Now if you actually think about it a little deeper, and probably you should do it when you're separately on your own, all these principles are related. They have some intimate connection between each other. Because you can do dependency inversion, you are able to do Liskov substitution. Because you can do Liskov substitution, you are actually following open close principle, because you're not modifying existing code. And you're not modifying existing code because you have built your code with single responsibility. Because you don't actually have all the things in the world in one component, you actually have smaller pieces. And smaller pieces are easier to replace than larger pieces. So all these principles actually work together unanimously, creating a harmonious software. And this is the fundamentals which you can apply to any code on any stack and any layer. There's one more important thing which I want to kind of share over here, which is domain driven design. Now, we are living in a world where we're kind of moving away from monoliths and moving into microservices. And the reason why we can do this is because we have to follow this notion of domain-driven design, which is not treating the entire problem statement as one giant monolithic structure, but actually individual pieces of functionality. And this is a book which was written by Eric Evans back in 2003, I think. It's a pretty big book, and I think you should all spend time reading it. If you haven't read it already, you should definitely take time out to read it. And it doesn't matter whether you're a front-end developer or a back-end developer, it's all about engineering software. And I'll reveal one more secret in the next slide, which will probably astound you. But this is an important area, and if you can understand these ideas of domain-driven design, you can build really beautiful and scalable and gigantic user interfaces without sweating, without actually losing your sleep, without pulling all your hair out, and so on and so forth. So these are the fundamentals. The solid and domain-driven design together will give you a much richer way of building software. So here's the secret. This is the classic UI development pyramid, or rather the structure. You will be spending only 20% of your time in frameworks. So knowing React or Swift UI or Flutter is only 20% of the whole equation. You will be spending 80% of your time doing software engineering, which is managing teams, creating deployments, creating a pipeline, creating abstractions which model the real world, connecting those abstractions, identifying the entities, values, relationships, what operations are being performed. Have you maintained a systematic constraint? Do you have integrity in your software? What is cohesion? What is coupling? All of those things actually will take up more of your time than the framework. So knowing React is not a big thing, by the way. Anybody can learn React. Anybody can learn Swift UI. Anybody can learn Flutter. These are not the most important things of UI development or software development. What's important is software engineering, which is your solid and your domain-driven design. Because ultimately, your job as a UI developer or a software developer is taking real-world problems, creating software abstractions for it, and creating visual representations for them on the screen. Right? As UI developers, that's what you're doing. You're taking your real-world problems and creating visual representations. Whatever screens you create to click on thing and navigate to other screens is just a matter of representing workflows from the real world. Right? If you were to fill up a form to submit to a meetup event, you start filling up the first page, and then you go to the second page and the third page and so on. You're just capturing data in multiple screens because you can't just have all the 100 fields on the same screen. Right? So that's just UI design. But a lot of times you're spending time in modeling abstractions. So data modeling and domain-driven design become paramount as you start growing into your career and as you start building larger applications. It's not about the framework, trust me. You can learn framework very easily. And there is like plenty of tutorials and stuff available on the internet to learn any framework out there. But nobody's going to teach you software engineering. Have you seen lessons on domain-driven design? If I compare the number of tutorials on Flutter and React and compare the tutorials on Solid and DDD, you can see it's like dwarfed completely. The number of tutorials is like this big, and tutorials on Solid and DDD is like this big. It's like the Earth is the tutorials for DDD and Solid, and the rest of the galaxy is about Flutter and React. Everyone talks about the 20% part. You know why? Because it's easy. It's very easy to tell you the things which is already in the documentation. I just read the documentation for a few weeks, and now I understand React, and I can teach you just React. I can teach you just Flutter or just Swift UI. But nobody's going to spend time in software engineering, because software engineering is where the rubber meets the road. That's where you solve real world problems, and real world problems are very complex. It's very hard to create a nice tutorial around it. It's very hard to create videos around it. So most people simply say, you know what, let's not do it. Let's just focus on the easy part. So, but as a developer, this is a secret which all you guys should know. Spend time understanding Solid and DDD, and the framework part can be learned anytime. So if you kind of take a step back, this is what you're dealing with as a UI developer. These are all the things which you have to deal with at the same time sometimes in order to create effective interfaces, scalable interfaces, and maintainable code. And if you apply all these things together, which obviously takes many years to kind of get to it, but you have to internalize this particular information. And internalizing is not that easy. It requires practice, and it requires doing things 10 times more complex than what you're doing on your any project that you're working on. So that in a nutshell are the common threads. Any questions? I'm happy to take them. If you don't have enough time right now, we can always do it afterwards as well. But the talk was mostly to give you like a quick summary of what you will be dealing with as a UI developer. And many of them may not be that intuitive and not be that easy to learn, but when you learn it, trust me, you'll have a better sleep and a better sanity in your mind. All right, thank you. Any questions, by the way? Do you have time for questions?
So we can have 5 minutes. We can have questions.
5 minutes? So 5 minutes for speed round. You guys are stunned that, okay, fine. One question.
Yeah, could you tell us something about block?
As in BLOC in Flutter?
Flutter block.
Use it if you like it. So block is just a state management layer, right? I mean, it's just a way of managing data. And you have 5 different kinds of fingers. So there are 5 different ways of doing the same thing. So block is just one of them. So it just happens to be a way to manage state inside a Flutter application. And it stands for business logic components. I won't go into the details, but it's just a way of capturing abstractions representing real world and giving you a reactive data, which will notify the UI whenever a logic component changes. Anything else? I know this could be a dense thing. You're like, what the hell this guy has talked about?
So we are moving from a REST API kind of architecture to a event-driven architecture now from the backend perspective. But does that substantially change how the frontends need to work with respect in relationship with the backend, or is it the principles are very similar?
It's very similar. In fact, I think the earlier talk talked about micro frontends, right? Where you apply the idea of microservices to frontends. And although what you're trying to do these days is our applications are becoming very complex. And managing complexity inside a single code base is not easy. A single team cannot build the entire application. You need multiple teams, globally distributed sometimes, but they're all targeting the same page, right? Your container is the same. So how do you deal with that complexity where you have so many different teams, so many different features, and the way to do that is to kind of break it down into smaller pieces. Again, the Thali application, right? So you instead of eating the Thali directly, you eat individual pieces at a time. And the same thing is happening on the front end and the back end. The back end is kind of breaking monoliths into microservices. The front end is breaking giant SPAs into smaller micro front ends. And so that's just a natural way of divide and conquer. Anything becomes bigger in size and hard to deal with, you have to break it down and kind of deal with that. So divide and conquer is a classic way of programming, right? That's what's happening with this page. All right. Go, sir.
Yeah, so nowadays you see businesses and customers are moving from minimal design, minimal UI, right? I think I'm on. Okay, sorry.
Now I'll repeat the question over this, yeah.
Okay, so the question is nowadays you see the trend of businesses moving from, businesses are moving towards minimal design, minimal UI, right?
Yep.
Do you see the evolution of microservices, a result of that? That is question number 1. And where do you see this going further?
Yep.
Got the question?
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
So I'll answer the first question, which is microservices based, right? I mean, the microservices is being used for quite some time. It's just that it has come into our common lingo only recently. But large software has always been built as microservices in the form of services or smaller pieces of code which target only a specific piece of functionality. Now, people have been doing it for 30, 40 years, believe it or not. It's just that we have come to learn about this term called microservices and this style of development only recently. Now, going back to your minimalism about UIs, that has to be the way forward, because the UI should not be the one that is distracting you from doing the job. The UI is just a tool for getting things done. And if you're adding more fanciness to the UI, then it's kind of distracting you from doing the thing that you actually want to do, right? So a lot of interfaces are becoming dark. Any design surface is becoming darker, right? If you look at all the tools in the past few years, Photoshop, Illustrator, Figma, or Affinity Designer, or Adobe, these guys all have adopted darker interfaces. And the reason for that is because content takes the primary importance inside your UI. It is not the other elements that you see around it. So minimalism are kind of focusing more on the thing that can help you get things done faster is the way forward. So minimalism happens to be one way of doing it, but there are other ways to kind of hide things so that they are only applicable and visible when you need them. So that's just a design philosophy. And Apple also has made this very popular with their own Stark interfaces. Every single company out there is kind of mimicking Apple in some way or the other. right? So, and it's just a good way of doing things. People should spend more time getting things done than being wowed by the interface in front of it, right? And if done well, the interface simply disappears, and you feel very empowered to actually get things done, right? We are definitely moving towards that. I mean, you see it already in your phones, right? Most of you, I mean, when you started out with our mobile phones, we had a keyboard where you would type a single key at a time, right? You would bring up your mobile, and then on the keyboard you type single key at a time. Nowadays you have swipe keywords. Have you guys tried that? Swiping is much faster, right? So you just focus on some pattern which is closer to the actual word that you want to type, and the software detects the word and then puts it out for you. So that's just taking the software or the UI out of the picture and focusing more on getting things done. Just a simple example. But yeah, the way forward is going to be divide and conquer larger pieces of code into smaller pieces. So microservices is going to be one way of doing it, and then creating minimalism so that we focus on getting things done rather than worrying about the interface that is there around it. Yep. Cool. I think we're running out of time, I guess. So last question maybe. So how many of you know reselect? Only 2 people. So do we need to answer the question for everyone? So, but just to kind of give you a broader context of what is reselect and why do we need it. So when you're building user interfaces in React, many a times your UI is going to change only when certain part of the data changes. And the UI that is changing should only respond to changes happening to the part of data which it is reading and not the entire state, right? So if your data, as I said, remember the slide where you showed the component state and the application state? The component state is very small compared to the application state, right? So the UI is only showing a part of the entire application. But many times when you create interfaces in Redux especially, you are kind of reading the entire store and re-rendering yourself. And that creates interfaces which are very slow. It doesn't make sense to actually render something when very small thing has changed and which is not even relevant to what you're showing on the screen. So reselect is a library that allows you to cache the data that you're showing from the application state onto the component state and allows you to re-render the UI only when that part of the UI changes. That's all it is doing. It's just a mechanism to increase the performance of your UI. So instead of spending time re-rendering the entire thing only because parts which are not relevant to you have changed, you focus on things which are relevant to you and only change or react whenever that particular part changes. So this just happens to be a library for simplifying that. All right, I think we're really running out of time now. So I'll move on to the next speaker. Thanks all for your time, and I'm available here if you have more questions.